So the thing is, Max Clifford Associates was phenomenally successful. He was raking in millions a year, which for that period was huge, absolutely huge. And, he was not only raking in millions a year for himself, but also for his celebrity clients. So who were they? Well, probably one of his most famous and certainly one of his longest clients has to be this man, Simon Cowell. Simon Cowell, sure, many of you know him. He is, of course, formerly a music industry boss, but then he progressed to TV. He had the X Factor. He had the whole Got Talent franchise, which went all around the world. Both of them made an absolute huge amount of money. But when he met Max Clifford, he wasn't there. He wasn't there. Clifford represented Simon Cowell for over a decade and was actually credited with shaping his public image. And Cowell dropped Clifford following Clifford being convicted in 2014. More on that shortly. And these two are very close. And while Cowell paid him a small fortune, Clifford had made much more for Cowell. Let me find a video. Here he is. Now, the audio is not great, but it's got subtitles. But here he's talking about how much he was being paid by Simon Cowell.
Has paid me £250,000 for the last 7 years. For a year? That's bonus and check. Yeah. He's made £1 million in the last 7 years. And I know the contribution.
Right. So what he's saying is that Cowell had paid him £250,000 a year for the last 7-8 years. And he did this in terms of introductions. He actually goes on to say here, including introductions to people like Murdoch as one example. And there is no doubt whatsoever that these two were as thick as thieves. And oftentimes, Clifford liked to portray himself as something of a Svengali to Simon Cowell, and that wasn't such a stretch, actually. I remember when he first started representing Simon Cowell, and Simon Cowell wasn't obviously the Simon Cowell that you know today, but I remember when he first started representing Simon Cowell, and he'd have journalists. Clifford had an office in Bond Street, but he'd bring in Simon Cowell to his office, and he'd have journalists come in. And Simon Cowell became well known for like really high-waisted trousers. And Clifford would like parade Simon Cowell in front of these journalists and have Simon Cowell lift up his t-shirt and show how high-waisted his trousers were and his hairy chest and everything. And Cowell was quite prepared to do it then. Obviously, he wouldn't do that now, but he was quite prepared to do it then. You know why? Because Simon Cowell, like all the rest of them, was a media whore. Absolutely. And it was the connections, the influence, and other things, as we will see, that Simon Cowell got from the relationship. And I don't think we should underestimate at all the impact that Max Clifford had on Simon Cowell. It was absolutely substantial. Max Clifford crafted Simon Cowell to be a superstar. A media superstar, a TV superstar. That was Clifford. And Cowell was already famous with Pop Idol when he brought in Clifford, but it was Clifford who took him to the next level. That was when X Factor came about. That was when the whole Britain's Got Talent and the franchise all came about. And when Simon Cowell was asked by Piers Morgan on Piers Morgan's TV series, Tabloid Tales, Morgan said, "What was the best career decision of your life?" And Simon Cowell didn't have a problem in answering that. He said, hiring Max Clifford. Oh, yes, indeed it was. Hiring Max Clifford. So why might that be? Now, this is a picture that often surfaces of Max Clifford and Simon Cowell together. This was taken around the 5th of March, 2012. And this was them hosting a Valentine's Day tea party at the Dorchester Hotel in London. This was for families supported by the Surrey Children's Hospice Shooting Star Chase. Now, Clifford was a patron of the charity, and they are pictured here with Sean, who was supported by the charity. Cowell said, "I've got to know many of the children there. For example, Sean will often text just to tell me what a great day she's had at Chase." And as you will see, Max Clifford did the Jimmy Savile thing, and that is he surrounded himself and his involvement with charities. You know, that gives that sheen of this is a good person. It's the halo sheen, isn't it? And I want to refer briefly to a very famous story doing the rounds. Okay. It's on YouTube. They call it the Simon Cowell and Max Clifford Buffet, but there is no proof that Simon Cowell was actually involved. However, let me tell you about this. Gavin Bain was a music industry insider. He was one half of the pretend rap duo Syllable and Brains. That's it. And Gavin gave an interview in which he talked about being at Stringfellows. Now, Peter Stringfellow infamously ran his club in Covent Garden for many, many years, and it was an absolute den of iniquity. Horrible, horrible stuff went on there. I mean, it was a lot of there was like topless dancing and everything, but it was just really horrible stuff. And they had private secret rooms. So this part is interesting. So what Gavin was saying was that when he was in the music industry, he went to a kind of like industry event that was held at Stringfellows. He bumped into a guy from Island Records. He said it was a really cool dude, and he ran after him into Stringfellows. And the guy seemed surprised that Gavin was there, and they went into a separate room, and the guy asked him if he was going to the buffet. And Gavin was kind of like looking around, and he said he saw all these guys, guitar techs, people who were trying to get in the industry. He saw another guy who he thought was underage there, saw other people he had seen at industry showcases. And then there was this other area, and he was like, what's going on over there then? Let me see if I can bring in an image of Gavin, which would obviously help. And so he was like, what's going on there then? What's over there in that corner? And he said that there were young people, there were young girls, there were young guys, maybe even as young as 13 or 14. He said that the clothes that the girls were wearing were completely inappropriate. These were very young girls, 13, 14. They had see-through tots where you could see their young breasts. And Gavin was really confused. And one of the people around, because the thing is about these sort of gatherings is the people in them really know each other because they've learned to trust each other because they're all into the same thing, right? But Gavin was an outsider, and there was this guy who had kind of been watching him, and he said to Gavin, you shouldn't be here. And clearly he shouldn't. And Gavin was like, what the hell is going on here? And now the prior conversation that he'd had with the guy from Island Records, when the guy from Island Records was like, well, what are you doing here? Well, la, 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 all that sort of stuff. And that is because they recognize each other. And Gavin was an outsider. Gavin had got in because he was going to an industry event at Stringfellows, and he'd followed this guy into a room, basically. He said he was really freaked out. I left. I saw people like big agents who were on TV shows talking about management. And he seemed to recall seeing Max Clifford there. And he found out that it was called Cowell and Clifford's, he found out that it was Cowell and Clifford's regular do, and it was called the buffet. He said he didn't see Simon there, but that is a very famous story that is doing the rounds on YouTube. Now, I don't know if it's true, and I am certainly not reporting it as fact. I am saying Gavin Bain claims this happened, and this is what he was told about it. However, what I am absolutely claiming as fact is Simon Cowell is a disgusting human being who, with the backing of Max Clifford, did all they could to expand the boundaries of what was acceptable for so-called family viewing on TV, without catching too many problems from broadcast regulator Ofcom. His X Factor and Britain's Got Talent, which obviously, as I say, was extended all around the world, often pushed adult entertainment onto an audience that was largely comprised of children. And over the years, I became increasingly horrified at what apparently passed as family entertainment. Should we have a little look at what passed as family entertainment? Here's an example of Lady Gaga on the X Factor, doing her satanic best. And look at all the writhing and the sexuality that's going on there as well. But you can see, obviously, all the imagery. They were pretending to fornicate on stage. It was just horrible. It was completely inappropriate family viewing. And that went all across the board, including anybody remember when Pussycat Dolls used to come on? That was also really repugnant. Let's see if I can just bring that in briefly as well. Again, extremely highly sexualized behavior. This was family entertainment. In the UK, primetime Saturday, like from 6 p.m. onwards, is considered family time. And this is the shite. And both those men, by the way, that you just see there were represented by Max Clifford, Louis Walsh and Simon Cowell. And Louis Walsh, oh, love it, love it, love it. Let's see those girls, those women writhing around on stage for the children in the audience. All of this stuff, right? That is inappropriate family entertainment. And I am not a Christian, right? I'm just telling you that I've watched and observed and reported on the sexualization of children for a very long time. And it's the normalization of this sort of stuff, very satanic, very over-sexualized, that has crept in at the hands of people like Simon Cowell, Louis Walsh, and their handler, Max Clifford. And that was going on. That was going on. So even just based on that, without all the other stuff that I'm going to tell you shortly about Simon Cowell, even just based on that, I know he's an absolutely repugnant person. Then, of course, there was that for many years, obviously, until Max Clifford was eventually caught, he was a protector of Simon Cowell. He's already told us there's 100 stories you don't know about Simon Cowell, right? But once Max Clifford had been, arrested, imprisoned, and then died, Simon Cowell was kind of exposed to a certain degree. And I think this clip really shows a lot of how exposed Simon Cowell was, quite literally. This was a car journey in 2019. Simon Cowell is arriving at auditions for Britain's Got Talent. I've played this before, but it seems absolutely appropriate to play it again now. So he's arriving in this vehicle, and I'm just going to give you the heads up so you know what to look out for. And he gets out of the car and he sees all the assembled press. Now, he knew the press would be there, surely. So for him to get out in such a state of disarray, and you see a young female get out the other side, but Simon gets out and he's like, oh my God, my flies are undone. And something has taken place in the back of that vehicle. Just check this out. This is Simon Cowell in the Raw.
Is it good to have handwork?
Simon, how do you feel about having the boys back together?
Me and David.
You and David, what about Anton Deck, having them both back?
Is that?
Yes.
No, he's not.
How is it seeing them both back working back together again?
I've seen them yet.
You haven't seen them yet, okay.
No.
How pleased are you they are going to be working?
Of course, yeah, I missed them. It'll be fun. Now I feel riveting. He has no idea what's coming.
And that tells you right there the complicity of mainstream media, because listen to their stupid questions. Simon, how do you feel about having the boys back together? Talking about Anton Deck, like completely take it over to celebrity gossip. Whereas somebody should have said, Simon, your flies are undone. What has been going on in the back of that car? Now, I don't know that young woman, although I have wider footage which shows who she is. I would suggest something rather untoward took place there, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if in the future there is a lawsuit pertaining to that. Somebody who said, I worked for him and this is what he forced me to do, right? That would not surprise me at all. I don't believe that he just had his flies undone for no damn good reason. I don't. Sue me, Simon Cowell, because it made me absolutely sick, the complicity of mainstream media right there. They distracted it over to Anton Deck and David Walliams, another creep that Simon Cowell had, working with him until he was exposed. These are creepy people all gathered together. So I thought that's always remained interesting for me, always. So there's loads of unanswered questions, really, including what the hell was Simon Cowell doing in the back of that car? Simon Cowell has long been a disgusting human being, and Clifford covered for it. These are facts. There was that time that Simon Cowell donated £90,000 to the IDF, the Israeli army. What more can you say? And it's because he's a Zionist, right? A Zionist. And also, there was that time when he famously gave £50,000 to Jonathan King when he was on bail accused of sexually abusing young boys. Jonathan King was for many years a celebrity DJ. And it was said that he ran child sex rings for the stars, that it was like a VIP club for perverts. And Simon Cowell gave him £50,000 when he was on bail. And when he was convicted, Simon Cowell said, I really regretted it. I thought he was innocent, blah, blah, blah. And King's career in the music industry effectively ended in 2001 when he was convicted of sexually abusing 5 teenage boys. He has denied all of this at length. But that's kind of like the type of people who gathered together. I find that interesting.